Welcome, everybody, to episode 75 of the MiamiTech Pod. I'm joined today by Will Weinraub and Ralph Quintero. The rest of our normal cast of characters is off on either vacation or taking the day off. So you guys are stuck with the two of us. So big warm of welcome to Ralph. This is your first appearance on the pod. I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and let's get rolling with this.
Thanks so much, man. I'm happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. Happy to join you pre-holiday weekend. It's always good. I'm Ralph Quintero. I wear many hats, mostly Chief GM Officer at JPEG Morgan. I also run the Daily Ralpha, and we can talk about that a little bit. But I've been involved in sales and marketing my entire life. I was the Vice President of Worldwide Sales and Marketing for JBL for many years. Spent the last 3 years in private equity, buying and selling old OG companies like Cross Pens and Scantron, if you guys remember that. I think you guys are old school enough to remember that. But just went full-time into Web3 back in January and absolutely loving it, man. So happy to chat about any of those things with you guys today.
Yeah, let's start there, Ralph. Again, we've gotten to know each other well over the past year as we both kind of dived into this crazy, wacky world of Web3 and NFTs and all this amazing degenerate behavior. But I think it would be cool to kind of take a step back and hear your story about how you got into the space. What was like that moment, that aha moment where you're like, you know what, I'm jumping in and going deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So always been an entrepreneur. One of the companies that I've run for, the last 10, 12 years is a domain investing company. So I've been buying and selling domains for a long time. And one of the guys who I joint venture with on a lot of domains last 4th of July tweeted, "Hey, everybody needs to go out and buy this cool cat." So I was at a family barbecue, middle of the day, and I DM'd him and I was like, "Shane, what is this thing?" And he's like, "Just shut up and buy it, dude. You've got some ETH in a wallet." I was very crypto light at the time. I had bought some Ethereum and some Bitcoin just to have something in my portfolio, but hadn't even really started thinking about blockchain technology behind it. None of that stuff. So he convinced me. I bought it. I paid $212 for my first cool cat. That was my first NFT. And I showed it to my family and they all laughed at me. Well, I mean, it was like, they made fun of me. They're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a cool cat." They're like, "What does it do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." "Are they going to send you a physical picture of it?" "I don't know." "And how much did you pay for it?" I'm like, $212. And they're like, "You got ripped off." Funny thing though, is that a week later, we were buying our third cool cat and we had as a family gone completely down the rabbit hole of NFTs. And today I don't know if I'm proud to say or embarrassed to say that I'm holding over 800 NFTs as a result of drinking my own Kool-Aid with these updates that I put together. But it's been an amazing journey.
It's interesting that you were in the domain name space before this, because there's some interesting kind of corollaries between domain names and NFTs. A lot of people would actually say that domain names were the original NFT, right? And it's interesting whenever I talk to folks that really don't know much about the Web3 space or the NFTs. I use domains as an example because a lot of times when you think about simplifying the concept of NFTs, is it makes the internet ownable, right? 100%. It makes the web ownable. And a good corollary that everybody can recognize in ownable property is domain names. If you owned homes.com, if you owned miami.com, that is a valuable piece of internet property. And I think you can then expand that to all these other concepts like music and art and collectibles. And I think it's a good foundation for folks to start thinking about the space.
100%. And the rarity of homes.com is significantly higher than miamihomes.com, even though that's still relatively rare and a good domain to hold. But if you're holding White Beach Homes in Key Largo.com, it's not going to get you very much, right? And I guess it's the same with NFTs. But I will tell you, there's still great opportunities in that particular space. And we can talk a little bit about that later, specific to ENS names. Yeah. That's actually become my biggest single NFT holding over the last couple months. Very bullish on ENS names.
Yeah, tell me about that. I'm going to go. This is going to be the episode of tangents because there's so many places we can go. And I think I love that about this episode. So ENS domains is an interesting one because I think I can see it. Domain names, obviously, it's a great example, and now we're bringing it to the web space as like your wallet address in a simplified form. But do you feel in this multi-chain world that we're going towards, Ethereum obviously is still the dominant one when it comes to building decentralized apps and NFTs, but other things are gaining a ton of traction. Solana, Flow, Polygon. Like we can see it, and like, is this going to be a repeat of how it is in domains, where the .com is always the preference, but then there's the .co and the .us and the .net? Is that how you see it?
You hit it right on the head, right? So like in the traditional domain world, every step you take below a .com, for the most part, drops the value of that domain by an entire order of magnitude, right? So if you have a $1 million .com, your .net is going to be worth 100 grand, and your .org is going to be worth 10 grand, and then everything else goes down from there. And then if you change languages, I'll give you a perfect example, right? Voice.com, most expensive domain name ever sold, $30 million. Wow. Voice.com, which is voice in Spanish, you'd think would draw like big numbers, right? Last reported sale for that domain, $3 grand.
I think there's an arbitrage.
$3 grand for a three-letter?
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely opportunities, Will. So the way that I see it, I mean, you hit it right on the head with that one. But I think that anything that's commerce related, ENS names are much more than just a domain. I mean, technically, with an ENS name, you could truly build a decentralized website. It's expensive right now, but you could actually build a website on chain and serve files on chain, and nobody can really take it down. It's really interesting when you start thinking of some of the use cases from a privacy perspective and from other angles as well.
I just saw on Twitter, I don't know how legit it is, but somebody owns NFT.xyz and they were offered $7.5 million for that.
I believe
domain.
it. So NFTs.com sold last month for 15 million. NFT.com sold a month before that for 2 million. I'm sure the guy who sold
was it to the same buyer?
Nope.
Do you know?
No, different buyers.
That's crazy.
Different buyers, different sellers.
Interesting.
Crazy.
But so like, I remember years ago, there was like a service that you'd plug in your brand, and then it would show you all the variant domains and like TLDs and all that stuff that existed, and it would let you like bulk buy them.
Yep.
I wonder if is anyone working on that for ENSs, because like RalphQuintero.eth and RalphQuintero.sol and all the other wallet or chains. There could be a.
Sounds like you have your next startup lined up, Brian. I mean,
writing this down now. We may have to delay publishing this until
you build it.
Bulk ENS.xyz gets.
It's actually not a bad idea. There are a couple of really good ENS tools out there. My favorite is ENS.vision. It's a great tool in terms of finding things that are expiring. It's the closest thing to like the domain investor tools out there. Mm-hmm. If you're looking or thinking about investing in domains, that's always a great start.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I've been buying domains since 1996, right? Like most of them, honestly, I've let expire or done stupid crap with them or whatever, like useless, right? But I was having an interesting conversation a few months back with our friend Hutch, who was deep in the domain space because he was a co-owner of a TLD.co, right? And so I was griping to him that like I hate that all these like quote premium domains are getting basically bought by the registrars and then resold because they're like proper words or whatever. Mm-hmm. And his argument was like, well, the registrars weren't capturing that value themselves before, like speculators were. Why not, right? Why not let the registrar? And I was like, yeah, but it feels like antithetical to like the spirit of the registrars being like these neutral parties that aren't getting involved in making, daily.ens or daily.eth work cost more than daily homes in Key Largo.eth, right? Like there's a spirit of like, I found this like nugget in a gold mine that I should be able to like extract for the same amount as, something not as worthwhile, but I don't know. That's just
I think blockchain fixes a lot of that, and even the way that the ENS service is managed, right? When a domain expires, a traditional domain expires, it goes through like that GoDaddy process where there's like a 30-day window and then it goes into auction. A lot of times GoDaddy will pick them up, or they'll price it so high that they know exactly what they're going to get. In this situation, you still get like with an ENS, you still get a kind of like a period where you can come back and extend the domain. But if it does fall into auction, it goes onto a bonding curve. So like immediately after it expires, any domain goes up to like $20 million. And then it starts to come down every second for like 2 weeks. So it kind of makes it fair somewhat to anybody who wants to buy it. I mean, there's always going to be people with deep pockets that are going to step in, but the game you're playing, right? And everybody's playing the same game. Nobody's swiping these things behind the scenes before they hit that curve.
Yeah, I mean, there could be value then to someone to create a bot that sort of looks at activity across an ENS, right? And then sees when they lapse because they didn't get renewed, and then waits patiently in the wings, until the price goes down, and then buys them, and then like pulls a fast one on whoever was sending money to that ENS, or was
right. I mean, it's so many exciting opportunities, but like I said, I think it's actually a better opportunity than the traditional kind of web 2 domain investing space, and I think a lot of what we do day to day, has that in common, right? Where all of a sudden Web 3 gives us opportunities to do a lot of things, like hire people halfway around the world to develop things for us or to collaborate with us. We're, again, dating ourselves a little bit. When I graduated high school, I'm probably older than both of you guys, but when I graduated high school, America Online hadn't even started sending out the floppy disk to our homes. Like that started in December after I graduated, right? So
how are you still alive, Ralph?
I was one of the last generations to graduate high school without email, right? And back then I was in awe of all this technology and all of this stuff happening around me with the internet. But like, I didn't have access to it because at the time there was the early days of the internet. So it was controlled by just a handful of big companies. If we wanted to research something, we had to go to the library with our library card, or if we were fortunate enough, we had an Encyclopedia Britannica or something at home, or a World Book Encyclopedia, but that was it. Fast forward to, and we saw what happened over that period of 30 years or whatever, right? Fast forward to today, and all of a sudden we've got email, we've got access to every bit of information we can. We can learn anything we want on YouTube. I fixed my dishwasher last weekend because of YouTube, right?
Yet it feels like society isn't smarter, even though access to information is easier than ever before. Like there's so much dumb behavior out there.
Yeah.
But maybe it was always there and I was just blissfully ignorant to it,
Yeah, I don't think that ever goes away, Brian.
Yeah. So speaking of access to information, like one of the things that you've been working on for the last year and change is something that like Will and I have both benefited from, which is the daily Ralpha, right? And so give everybody who's listening like a quick sort of like, well, how did daily Ralpha like come to be, right? And then we can dive into like where it is now and like what you think will, where it'll go.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. So shortly after that infamous family barbecue, went down the rabbit hole and started to realize that this space moves at like breakneck speed. It's faster than any other space I had ever been involved with. And there were so many things going on that I had to keep track. I had to find a way to keep track. I like to compartmentalize things, and I love using tools like Notion and stuff to stay organized. So I started putting together kind of a recap for my immediate family. At the time, it was just my wife and my 2 boys, because they were into it at this point. Like what was going on for the day? What kind of drops were we going to watch? What was going on with the market? And we started sharing it in a WhatsApp group that we started called the NFT Gang. And then we changed the name to the GM Gang when we learned what GM was. Like, I'm like, why is everybody saying GM on Twitter? But slowly we started adding my nieces and nephews, my brother-in-laws. So the family WhatsApp group extended to like 20 people. It's like mostly family and 2 friends in that group. That group still exists today, and the Daily Ralpha still goes out to that group before it goes out to anybody else. With
That's
only
true
one,
alpha.
Yep. One minor change, which is the opening paragraph, because like my family, if I just send out an impersonal thing, they're gonna be like, what are you doing, dude? But I joined you guys in this group that was called the NFT WhatsApp chat. I'll never forget that. I think I joined like in August. And Gianni, who was already a member of the group, reached out one day or said something in the group and said, "Hey, is this minting today or is this minting tomorrow?" And I privately DM'd him my family update. And he's like, "Dude, what is this?" I'm like, "Oh, it's just this little update that I put together for the family." He goes, you need to just like drop that in the main group. And the rest is history. I mean, almost 360 updates later, it's been published. It had been being published every day, 7 days a week. And then as we entered the bear market and things slowed down, it's going out Monday through Friday right now, unless something major is going on a weekend. But it hasn't veered off much from where it started, but it just provides you a quick daily update, quick read on what's going on in the market. It's a great market pulse. Like if you read that in the morning, you show up to the office, even if you're not actively buying NFTs right now, you can at least have a smart conversation with somebody about what's going on in the space. And that's what I had originally set out to do, right? Besides just kind of staying organized around it, I think that the way we all win is by onboarding as many people as possible into Web3. And I feel that the Daily Ralpha is kind of that first step for a lot of people because it's not super technical, but it's not super dumbed down. It just gives you exactly what you need to know to get your day started.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it's also like when you're in groups like JPEG, Morgan, it can be overwhelming. The amount of just sort of you're consuming from a fire hose, right? You know, and Daily Ralpha has been something that's been very useful as far as like distilling this. And like, there's times where like that's the only thing I pay attention to of the group in the whole day because I have stuff to do and I can't follow 200 plus people chatting back and forth about every little thing, you know? And so
I appreciate that. I get that feedback a lot. That's what really warms my heart. So today, you know, really fast forward after putting this thing out, it's read by about 55,000 people every morning. And that accounts for like duplicate eyeballs, meaning people that are in multiple groups that get it. And it just blows me away. And I get constant feedback like every day of people saying, "Man, this has helped me out." Or somebody who said, "I had been sitting on the sidelines and I finally pulled the trigger on something that was in there and it was amazing. And thank you so much." So it's really been exciting to see it develop. And I'm excited to see where it goes, right? We recently just put out, one of the sections of the Daily Ralpha is an NFT tool of the day. You know, we've been talking about tools like Notion or this ENS Vision. Tools are an important part of anything we do, you know, whether it's a website builder, no-code tool. And it's no different in the NFT space. There's a ton of different tools. So over time, I've been keeping this database of tools, and we finally just released it as a tools directory. So if you go to dailyralpha.com, there's a little section at the bottom that says NFT tools. And you can filter it depending on what you're looking for. There's rarity tools, there's wallet trackers, portfolio trackers, all different kinds of things. And it helps if you're looking for something specific or just as you're getting started on your journey. And then from there, I don't know, I get all kinds of requests all the time, from all different angles. One of the most common requests is, you know, can you add a button so that I can add these drops to my calendar? And that's coming.
I mean, I feel like that should be a pro feature. That should be a pro feature. Like charge someone a monthly subscription fee so they get access to some of these things, you know?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, you and I should probably talk about that a little bit because there are a couple of things coming that I definitely have on the roadmap that I think would be super, super valuable.
How do you try to separate some of the fluff in the space? Because you write this newsletter every single day, and I'm sure you go through your research, and there's probably like fringe candidates, things you want to highlight and things you're like, I don't know about this. It's got some momentum. Do you kind of just like, you know, write things down and put some disclaimers? Like, how do you think about things as you go through the market and you're not sure about a project? Like, what's some of the Ralpha filters that you go through?
So there's a lot of research that goes into it. I mean, it takes me about 4 to 4.5 hours a day to put this together, right? And it's broken down usually between evening. I do most of it, like call it from like 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. The night before I drop it. And then I put in another hour's worth of work, like, 5:30 in the morning with coffee in hand, just to make sure that whatever I put, together the night before is still accurate, because the space does move so quickly. Things change. But over time, I've kind of been refining my rubric of what goes into selecting a project. Obviously, we've all heard, NFA, not financial advice, DYOR, do your own research. That's all still very important. And I always have that disclaimer in everything that I send out. But for me, I've started to get really picky about what ends up making the list. And sometimes I get it wrong. I mean, I don't always get it right. There's over 1,000 projects that get dropped every single day in all different kinds of sizes. That's a ridiculous amount of projects. I couldn't possibly keep an eye on all of those. But usually I'm evaluating like 30 to 50 projects. And it's not like they just drop on my lap the night before and I have to like research these. I start seeing them over time. So like this new project came out, it's an early project, fine. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm reaching out to the team. I'm DMing them. I'm trying to figure out is there any correlation between this team and some other project that they've done. And a lot of times I reach out to the teams personally. So I have enough conviction that they're not going to go away. They're not going to rug people, that, in the traditional business world, I invest in people first. And it's no different for me on the NFT side. I start with people and then I start looking at the merit of the project and where they're heading and really what the likelihood that they're going to stick around if things go bad, like we're dealing with right now in this bear market.
Are you keeping track of all of this stuff in like an internal database or like in Notion and all this stuff? Because like it's one thing like sharing the blurb about the project and the drop and all this stuff, but like it sounds like you're like connecting more dots in the background than anyone is externally seeing, right? And there's a lot that's super valuable data.
There is, and I do collect it. It's interesting because as we were building out the tool directory, I had to go back, right, and go through every single one of these daily Ralphas, and it was amazing to see kind of our thought process back then, like a year ago, when we were putting out some of this stuff. And I was like, some of the stuff was like cringeworthy. I'm like, man, did I really believe that when I put it down? But it is, you start to see patterns. Like I love data because data tells stories. And, I think ultimately there's a bigger data play here. There's a lot of people who I've been talking to in this space. My buddy Salil, and I say buddy, I met him recently, but he's created an incredible tool called Prosper Circle. It quickly became one of my go-to tools, and he's got even better data than I do, and he's connecting a lot of these dots. And I think that there's an opportunity, Brian, and well, like in terms of like startups and things that you can build for that specifically of connecting the dots, like even a Twitter tool, right? That says the person who started this account is connected like to all of these other accounts, and you can almost like a Palantir type, thing where it's drawing a mind map for you, and you can start to spot those trends. But that's how I do it, Will. Like to answer your question specifically, after I reach out to the team, then I keep an eye on it and I start ranking them within my own database. And they start coming up or they start coming down. And then the night of, I look and I'm like, okay, here's what's for the date. This is how I rank those. What's going to make the list. And I make a final call on it. And I check to make sure that it's a real audience. They're not botted. They're really engaged with their community. The community isn't there just to like shill or like speculate. And that's hard because right now we say what you want about any of us. I mean, we're all builders in this space, but as investors, we can't deny that we're speculators. Right? Totally. Like we could say we love art and we do, and we could say we love utility and we do, but we're here to speculate still.
Well, that's still the unfortunately where the space is today, because everything is promising future development and whatnot. But I'd like to talk about that as a good segue. Let's put our Miss Cleo hats on for a second, for those of you that get that reference.
Dude, we are sold.
There's all these like 19-year-old Web3 folks like, Cleo, what are they talking about? So let's think about Miss Cleo style hats on 10 years from now. We're looking back on the space, right? Where are things? Like where's the space evolved to? Because like the way I think about it, if you look at PFPs, right, and this is like the latest iteration of the space. We had kind of the CryptoKitty stuff that happened in 2017, then CryptoPunks, and now the Bored Ape Yacht Club kicked off, I think, the era of PFPs. I think when you look at the space 10 years from now, PFPs are like inning one, the top of the first, right? But where do we see the industry going? I would love to get your thoughts on it. 10 years from now, what are like the really core use cases that we're going to see NFTs play a role in? Because NFTs at the end of the day, I think that term is going to start to fade away. That just becomes underlying infrastructure. Where do you see the use cases and people using NFTs on a daily basis?
So I often say that NFTs are a gateway drug to blockchain technology. At least it was for me. And as I talk to people and I share that analogy, they're like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know that I would have been as interested in blockchain technology had I continued to just buy crypto. Because I didn't connect the dots. Like, I understood the importance of it, but it really didn't click for me until I bought my first NFT. But you make a great point. Well, I don't know that, like, 10 years from now, we're all super excited about the next, like, whatever party ducks drop. Right. The reality of it is that it's going to really be utility plays. I think that everything eventually is going to become tokenized. So, that NFT is essentially an unfungible token, and we're going to be able to invest in the tokens for things that are either like near and dear to our hearts, our lives, day to day, and it fixes a lot of problems, right? So I was in an education space the other day, and I brought up a point, and I mean, you guys all have LinkedIn profiles. I mean, most of us do, right? So anybody can build a LinkedIn profile today and put anything on it, right? So Will, I don't know where you went to college, but you could essentially say that you graduated from Harvard with a business degree, right? And you apply for a job, and you've all hired people. You've all been hired. Has anybody ever called your university to ask if you really graduated from there?
No, you could write right now. You could write the founder of Microsoft on your LinkedIn profile, and nobody would validate that. So it's unfortunate.
Right. And NFTs fixes that to a certain degree, right? Because if you can tokenize the courses that you take, if you can tokenize your complete, say, degree path, now you can verify. Right. Or you can start to hire for very specific skill sets, which I think is something that just the career side of things is going to evolve to.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
In the real estate space, I think that the first people who should be shivering in their boots, kind of like travel agents did back when the internet completely revolutionized travel, is anybody that's doing any like verification, right? Like title companies. There's no reason why your home can't be tokenized, right? Your house is an NFT. Maybe there's an identical house in the identical colors and everything, but you can't put one house on top of another. It's like squarely tied to that lot that you live in. So today's title search, not to get a little too boring, but today's title search, like, part of it is, did a contractor come to your house and do something and you didn't pay them? Is there a lien on your house? All of that could be tied to the smart contract of that particular home, like, and instantly verifiable. So many use cases for this stuff. And then rights management, right? Last one, rights management. My wife's an artist. She's a surface pattern designer. She licenses her designs to fabric manufacturers. Currently, she's got like 15,000 designs under license, and it's a pain to track all those licenses. Who's using it? What are the terms of those licenses? Blockchain fixes that. I mean, we're already looking at fixing some of those things. A lot of her stuff is being turned into NFTs so that we can more easily manage it. And then yesterday, a friend of all of ours, AJT, Alex Taub, introduced this friendly license for their 187 project tied to the goblins and tied to like truth and Illuminati. And there were mixed reactions about that because, we've all been talking about this CC0 and all of this royalty management. One of the things that I really like about that is, like, I'm a smart guy. We're all generally smart. We've all been involved in business. Could we go out and close a licensing deal for our PFP? Probably. Am I going to get the most out of it? Likely not. Right. Yeah. So what I like about what they put on the table is their license allows kind of like a co-partnership with them, and they're going to go out and they're going to help close and cement some of these deals. And, where I may have been able to close $100,000 deal on my PFP, they may be able to close $1 million deal on that same thing. And I end up doing much better in the long run. So I think that's going to continue to evolve, but those are the kinds of things that make me excited looking ahead.
Yeah. The validation of your credentials is a very interesting one. I think there's legs there. And I think, who at the end of the day, who would validate that? Would Florida State University and Harvard and, Princeton, would they basically say, okay, you graduated, here's your token? Yeah. That's kind of interesting.
They become the deployer of those tokens. or a validator on a like, bigger token, like there may be an education token. I don't know.
I think a Web3 LinkedIn is super fascinating, to consider. Because again, so much of your reputation is done online these days as the world gets more and more digital. I think that there's a lot of potential behind that idea. So no, that's an interesting one. I want to see Ralph go on that podcast. What's the guys that keep poking holes in all the Web3 stuff? And I think Ralph would do really good on that show.
I'd love to check that out.
As a cartoon avatar or something like that. I forget the name.
I think that's but that like the whole credential validation and disbursement or distribution, that's $100 million a year business. Because education as a whole is a multi-trillion-dollar a year business. And there's 4,500 universities like that are credentialed, four-year universities in this country at least, with 4 million students across them. So like every year you're talking about 1 million possible graduates who need to add this to their LinkedIn's and all that, and so
that solves for onboarding people, right? Again, our mission, I think, if we want this to succeed, we need to make it as frictionless as possible. Will, you alluded to this earlier with multi-chain. Like nobody gives a shit about that.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Like there's no reason that someone using crypto kitties or Cryptoys or any of these should have to have 6 different wallets. Each one is a potential point of security failure. And also they should have to care about the volatility of the underlying coins and all these other things.
It reminds me a lot of the early days of Web 2, where again, my previous company before I sold it was called Live Ninja, and I remember building that prototype. And people would ask me, what are you building on? What code base are you building on? And I would say PHP. And they would laugh at me. They'd be like, what? You built PHP? Like, no, you need to be building in Python or Ruby. Like, that's it. Like, it can't be either. If it's not one of those, you're screwed. There's no way it's going to be successful. And now you fast forward to 10 years later, does any consumer go to a website and care about what it's built on? What the underlying tech is? Facebook was built in PHP. Did anybody care? Twitter was built in Ruby. It went down half the time. Did anybody care? Does anybody ask? So it's just like, to me, I think that's the stage that we're on with NFTs. We're in the early kind of like, what code base are you built on? And where like, the maximalists go. But I think you fast forward 10 years, people are just going to care that the user experience is phenomenal. Number one, that's all that matters, user experience. 2, are the fees incredibly low because nobody wants to pay gas fees or exorbitant fees if they don't have to? And 3, do I have true ownership of this asset? And do I have, can I liquidate it? Is there liquidity in the market? And if you hit those 3 things, I think the blockchain that you're on is irrelevant because people just want to buy, sell, and trade. People want a great user experience and low fees. So I think you're going to see multiple projects on multiple different chains. If that hit those 3 things, they're going to do very well.
I agree. I also think that one of the things that's going to change the game is kind of the advent of additional marketplaces. And that's not a super popular opinion right now, but I think that actually helps us all win because kind of in the example that I used before with the rights, the IP rights of a project, who better than to have the best interests of a project than the project owners themselves, right? So it's interesting because it's kind of backwards from what we see in the e-commerce world, right? Like everybody starts off as this small shop and then ends up on Amazon. And I think what we're seeing now is like everybody's starting out on OpenSea and getting a bunch of eyeballs, but then starting to move off of OpenSea so that they can deliver a more customized, better experience, kind of a holistic experience for their collectors and a place of trust, right? I think I would trust a Bored Ape marketplace that's run by them or a Gutter Cat Gang marketplace that's run by them much more than I currently trust OpenSea.
Right.
But
and there's danger to consumers. Sorry, Brent. Just to finish that thought, there's dangers to consumers on full decentralization. Everybody thinks they want full decentralization and this maximalism on it. But when somebody steals an asset that's worth 6 figures, you need to call someone for help.
Exactly.
So yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think there's a sort of interesting thread that we're like sort of tugging at, which is like, and Ralph alluded to this earlier, of everything becoming tokenized, right? Like you're not going to want to go onto OpenSea to sell your house, right? Or to buy a NFT of a house,
Right.
or water rights, or whatever the product may be, right? You're going to need a marketplace that's conducive to just that specific transaction type, and like where someone from, open house market or whatever can walk you through the steps required, because OpenSea they could facilitate the transaction, but then what do you do with this NFT you have of a title? Like you won't know how to like do the next step, Um,
Yeah, that's why
I
we're
think,
so early, right? Like there is
yeah.
so that's where it's interesting, right? Like there's people that could just throw their hands up in the air and go, "Oh, I'm not doing this." Or this I think the smarter people in these spaces that are about to be like massively disrupted, they can start looking and saying exactly what you just said, right? Like I'm in real estate right now. Maybe I should start looking to build the first real estate marketplace for houses that are tied to NFTs. And what does that mean? And start the education process around that. There's a realtor in Miami who I follow, and she's kind of positioned herself as the kind of the crypto realtor. And she's got this incredible following, but she's doing just that, right? She got her feet wet in crypto and said, look, I know that this is where it's going. I don't know everything about it, but I'm going to position myself as a person who's going to learn about it and is going to share that with people. And it's serving her really well. And I think anybody who does that, it is going to win. And I think like a platform like Shopify is going to help with those things, because as soon as you can create your own NFT marketplace, as easy as you can build a Shopify store, then you start to see some really unique things. So like, for example, we're all into sports. Why isn't there just a sports only NFT marketplace? Or why isn't there a basketball only, or a high school basketball only? Like you could start getting really like, they say the niches are in the riches, or the riches are in the niches. That's how you win this game, like getting really specialized around, certain types of NFTs.
Yeah. I also think we need, as a space in general, the only way that this goes mainstream, if this has a chance of becoming mainstream tech, is that consumers need to get to the point where they're purchasing this and not thinking, is this a good investment, as the first thing that crosses their mind. Because that's what's, and I'm dealing with this also because, with Cryptoids, we're trying to bridge the gap between early Web3 early adopters, which, support the project, to, toy collectors and the comic book crowd and the folks that go to Comic Cons and things like that don't really care about NFTs, for money making sake. But when you change the conversation and you don't think of it as a flippable asset, as like just something I need to think about do I need to check the value of it? And it's purely around enjoyment. It's purely around fandom. It's around collecting, things like that. You start to shift the narrative into things that, spark joy and that spark a lot of the things that we do, with current collectibles or in different industries like music, like entertainment. I think we just need to help the space in general, and this is obviously a collective effort of anybody that's operating in the space, start thinking about less about price volume, and price action and, numbers, and get into more of this like just daily enjoyment kind of thing of some of the things that these things can enable. And then I think, the price action, it's obviously something you can transfer and liquidate and sell. The price action will get back to a healthier state when that's a byproduct of entertainment, of enjoyment and fandom, versus what we're doing now, which is the opposite route. It's all about price action, and hopefully we get entertainment down the line. Hopefully we get stuff that we can enjoy down the line. So, these are the things that I think about. I don't know if you agree with that.
I agree. And it's on us though, right? The key to what you said is it's on us to change that narrative. It's like, I don't know if you remember a few months ago, it feels like forever ago, but we started having this conversation of whitelist versus allow list. Like we changed that narrative, and I still see whitelist being thrown around every once in a while. But man, like I would say that now as I go through all of these different projects where it was all whitelist, now I would say that it's only maybe 20% people's projects still referring to it as whitelist and everybody else referring to it as allow list, or they've come up, like they've coined some fun term for it. But we did that, right? And I think that if we can start changing the narrative around it and start telling these stories like through platforms like this or like just in day-to-day conversations, I think we can change the game, because we are still early. We're so early. Like it feels like we're not, because we're in this space every day, but we really are. Like if you look at the number of active wallets and just like people in the space, so much room to run.
Yeah, this, it's funny. Like, I've been going down, like, my whole career, I've been going down different rabbit holes of different technologies and all this stuff, and like the last few weeks, I've been like deep diving on like AI and machine learning, art
Hmm.
and text generation, GPT-3, all this other stuff, and it feels like the same feelings we had in July of 2021, and whenever everyone was sort of like fascinated by NFTs and all this stuff. And I think so much of this is like we're still in the first inning of all this, like we're at the stage where the only people playing the game are the ones who figured out how to make their own baseball bat and glove, like because that glove wasn't for sale anymore,
Right.
like, and I think and this is like I'm sort of like mixing all these like metaphors and analogies and all this stuff, but like it feels like in 10 years when we're having this conversation again, we're going to be like, oh, remember when you actually had to care about XYZ details, right? And they weren't just taken care of
Mm.
for you, or like you didn't just seamlessly, bring your cryptoys into Disney World and like see them on the ride next to you,
Right.
or whatever it was, like the the real beauty of all this is like portability and portability across platforms, portability across worlds, and then also the liquidity aspect too, and I know you guys were talking a second ago, Will was concerned about how like we need to try and shift the conversation away from sort of speculators, but the reality is also knowing that you could unload your stuff in a let's say a Ralpha marketplace, or whatever it is, like instantly also de-risks the investment or the expenditure for a collector too, like
100%.
because like if you go in and you're buying something and then all of a sudden like it's not for sale, you can't sell it on any marketplace, or like, and you had to take 20 steps to like buy it in the first place. Like I remember sitting in the Grove in 2011 at this bar, the Grove spot, with a bunch of nerd friends of mine.
That's where I
Maybe it
first
was
met you.
2010, and they were like, "Oh, you got to buy this Bitcoin thing," and I was like, "Well, how do I do this?" And it was like
You
$6 at the
wire
time,
money to some dude in Russia and hope
and
he sends you
Yeah.
something back.
yeah, and it was like, oh, it just follow these 25 steps, blah, blah, and then you have it in a piece of paper because you can't keep it on your computer and blah, 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 because it's not safe. And I was
Yeah.
like, and then my thought process was like, okay, then what happens when I want to get rid of this? When I want to sell it? And like, and there was no like marketplaces and all these other things, fast forward a few years, like I should have spent the hour to learn how to do this, because then I'd be doing this podcast from my yacht, or whatever. But like, I think we're right now in that phase of like the people who invest the time in learning and going through the high friction that exists now are going to be the ones who reap the benefits
a hundred,
downstream.
100%. Boys, it's been
But
great hanging here, man. We have to do this again. It almost feels like we need a follow-up show.
It was
for
fun.
sure,
I could have done
let's
keep
do
going
it.
for
Let's
two
do it.
hours.
We'll do another episode in a few weeks, and then you can give us an update on how Daily Ralph is going. We can touch on the new venture that you joined this year that's still
Oh,
in
Crypto
stealth,
League. Oh,
right?
so much to talk about that. We'll
Yeah.
come back for sure on that one and have a chat about Crypto League. That's super exciting, especially for people in this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe to Daily Ralpha. Hey, if you ever mint your newsletters and your episodes, I want issue 1, like Spider Man
Ooh,
issue 1, the first
man, you just
appearance
gave me
of
a great idea.
go.
I like it.
Let's bid. I want to be on the bidding for issue 1.
Thanks so much, you guys. Love you, man.
Yeah.
This has been great. Thanks, everybody.